Hello and good evening and welcome to the QMU Postgraduate Open Day. We're going to spend maybe just a wee while looking at the MSc Person-Centred Practice opportunities at Queen Margaret University. My name is Bill Lawson and I'm one of the lecturers within the School of Health Sciences, and I'm particularly attached to the Division of Nursing. As you'll see when we go through the slides, person-centred practice encompasses the possibilities for many different sort of perspectives and professions to come on board with things. Now, thank you for all those who are here tonight. We'd certainly welcome any questions as we're going through the following few slides. So please, if you have any questions, please feel free at any point to interject. So what we have here in our sort of first slide is just a picture of the Queen Margaret University campus. We're just on the outskirts of Edinburgh in a town called Musselburgh, but in terms of very close to a railway station, so actually to get to the centre of Edinburgh by train takes 6 minutes, and there's frequent buses in and out of town as well. But it's a small university, roughly about 5,000 students, sort of undergraduate and postgraduate, and as I say, everything is self-contained within the one campus. As you can see, we've been open now for about maybe 12, 13 years now, so it's still very much a modern campus, and we've got lots of nice grounds around, etc. So lots of nice walks, and we're very much see it as important that our environmental credentials remain strong in terms of our interactions with the environment and things like energy usage, etc. So, MSc, the Masters in Person-Centred Practice, and there's been lots of people from a variety of backgrounds, mostly through sort of like a health perspective or a social care perspective. Very much see that person-centred practice is a term, it's a way of working that is being given increasing acknowledgement, and certainly within in Britain, North America, and increasingly in the Scandinavian countries, the concepts and philosophies behind person-centred practice have emerging, and this is very much backed up by a lot of sort of important research that just shows that the value that this philosophy, this way of working, actually impacts on the way in which care is delivered. If you actually look at the language, actually even with some of the World Health Organization statements, the term for care to be person-centred and for person-centred practice to lie at the centre of the way in which we work as practitioners or as people. Again, it just shows you that the person-centred practice perspective is sort of like at a national level within Britain, with an international level across Europe, and that's actually increasingly at a global level as well. So if ever was a time for those people who are thinking about going on to do their masters from a variety of contexts, the possibility of looking at doing a master's in person-centred practice probably comes along at a very good time just now. And if we think about all of the issues that are currently facing the world in terms about ways of working, all the changes that we've had to make and to adapt to, one thing about sort of person-centred practice is looking at the importance of our values, our beliefs, our cultures, and our way of working, and aim to be person-centred, not just with the people that we work with, or the people we work for, but also the people we work with. If ever is a time where we were needing to sort of, try and enhance our ways of working and make sure we work in a culture that is supportive and empowering, if ever was a time, that's probably now as much as any other time. So there's actually two fundamental aims of what the MSc in person-centred practice actually involves. And as you can see here, the first one says it's about enabling practitioners working in a variety of contexts. As we've said, that is often people from health and social care, but there's a possibility from those in third sector, and people who have taken up the MSCs or looking at person-centred practice, across the world. This includes some medical staff, paramedics, all allied health professionals like physiotherapists, speech and language, occupational therapists, podiatrists, and nurses, etc. So that range of who these practitioners are It's very much that sense that there's a wide variety of contexts that this could be applicable to. And so it's about these practitioners advancing deep and critical understanding of different sources of knowledge, including research evidence. And that is, I suppose that's where the mastersness element comes into. I think that understandings of knowledge and our appreciation and review and critique of research and evidence, that's where the mastersness level comes in. And I suppose there's a certain applicability to whatever postgraduate and master's programs you're thinking of looking at and undertaking. So what is it with specifics about the MSc in person-centred practice? Well, the fact is that we're looking at that deep and critical understandings in relation to the health and well-being of persons. And that's not just single persons, that's looking at these persons within groups, and also looking at populations in the widest sense. And so that is a case of that the aspects around being a person, aspects of personhood. So there's often some quite sort of philosophical sort of underpinnings behind the work that we look at. And one of the slides we come on to is actually what we mean by to be person-centred. What is it to have that approach? So as well as that sort of, as I say, about understanding and looking at knowledge, looking at what contributes to the health and well-being of a person, a group, and also the population as a whole. The other aim of the Masters is to create and enable communities of practice through collaborative and interprofessional working from the perspective of lifelong learning. And where that means is, and what we take from that is that the first one is about, as I say, developing your own knowledge and seeing how that can be applied to your practice. What the second aim is really looking at is the building up of relationships. It's also looking at the fact that as you sort of embark on these programs, you do get that sense of community, of learning, that community of practice. And we put a lot of store by within the different modules and the ways in which we work is how we want to sort of look at how we build relationships from that person-centered perspective, how we develop that working, so that you take it from, these are skills that you learn or you develop within that community as learners. Then you take that skills and then that goes into how you become your communities of practice. And then basically how that then shows itself in your working within teams in which you're working or in between with different multi-professional groups of things. And this is an underpinning, a theoretical perspective that we hope sort of transcends and sets you up with skills and a mindset that will stay with you for sort of that idea of lifelong learning, etc. And so it's very much a case of this strong theoretical underpinnings that's very much aligned to how that then sets yourself up for your, in essence, your working career and the relationships you have with the people that you actually sort of work with. So I suppose we sort of, we mentioned in the first slide as to what exactly we mean by person-centeredness. We spoke about the aims. If you actually look at before we go into the actual sort of philosophy itself, if you actually look at the cloud with the words in it, etc., that was brought about by, speaking to a few of our classes, a few of our modules, and actually to say what words they attribute to person-centeredness. If you actually look at some of the things that we're talking about there, we see words like sort of personhood. What exactly does it mean to be a person? What impacts on our personhood? Does our personhood, for example, change? Is the personhood of a child different from the personhood of an adult? Is the personhood of a baby any different from the personhood of someone with dementia? And which shapes then, and how does that person and that personhood show itself and adapt and change over time? Or is there certain fundamental tenets of personhood that transcend all ages, etc.? If you look at some of the other sort of words we've got in there was a lot of stuff around. There's expertise, there's values, there's beliefs, there's working collaboratively, understanding. And I suppose these are really nice sort of encapsulations of many of the issues that we consider to be important and actually we incorporate into our teaching as well. And if you have a look at the small circles along the bottom, again, you'll sort of see some of the things that are important to us around engagement and collaboration. And then these are things that, again, that we see are important building blocks or important links in a chain that help us to work towards an understanding of personhood. There's been a lot written, or there's an increasing amount of literature written around person-centered practice. But two of the main sort of writers, or two of the main exponents in the development and of what person-centered has been for a good number of years now. But the philosophy that we use is actually guided by the work of McCormack and McCants. And they have defined and refined person-centeredness over their many years of writing. And the current definition of person-centeredness is an approach to practice established through the formation and fostering of healthful relationships between all care providers, service users, and others significant to them in their lives. And I suppose it would maybe be good to just spend maybe just a few minutes maybe unpicking what we mean. So some of the aspects there, that there are different approaches to practice one can actually take. We can take approaches around the importance of management, the importance of leadership, but for this establishment for person-centeredness, that approach to the ways in which we think, the ways in which we carry out our actions, the ways in which we work, and the ways in which we communicate are based around that sense of that building of a relationship, okay, through that starting to build that relationship, often from the essence of that formation. And once we've got to that point of that building of rapport, that building of a relationship, and this is a relationship that can be an incredibly brief one. For instance, a patient coming into a doctor's surgery briefly, or someone coming to an accident emergency department, as examples, to long-term relationships, maybe building up with people within sort of care homes, people maybe in sort of clinical areas for a long time, or people out in the community who are getting regular visits from, say, community staff. So that formation and that length of time in which that relationship gets built, that may be within literally just a few minutes of interaction, or that may be interaction that's going on over a period of days, weeks, months, years, etc. It's not just about the establishing of a relationship, it's that idea of fostering, it's building and developing that relationship. And it's not just about a relationship, it's about a healthful relationship. That's one that acknowledges both parties within the relationship. It acknowledges your importance, it acknowledges your personhood and your values and beliefs, as well as that of the people that you're working with and working for, etc. So we've looked at that idea about what is it and why is it important that we develop and foster these healthy relationships. And this is one of sometimes the misnomers about person-centered practice. It's only about putting the service user or the patient or the client at the centre of what we do, and somehow everything else is sort of secondary to that. If you actually look at that definition by McCormack and McCants, you actually see it that there's equal relevance given to that fostering of healthy relationships between all care providers. So that's who you work with in your teams, people who interact with your teams, and that real sense of that building a culture where there is good, healthful relationships, and there's an openness and there's no authenticity, and there's the idea of high support and high challenge working within teams to move and develop their practices, etc. Then that has equal presence, because it could be sort of proposed that if we don't really look after ourselves and that we don't have to develop our own culture that acknowledges our beliefs and values, that therefore then that may not be able to, we may then not be able to provide that to our service users if we don't see how we can provide it to ourselves as a team, etc. And remember, nobody is seen in isolation, so it's not just about ourselves as a team or the person at the centre, it's about others significant to them in their lives as well. Now, we're very lucky at Queen Margaret, because what we have is that Professor Brendan McCormack is our sort of professor, and he's the head of division for nursing, occupational and arts therapies. So actually we have, through the works of Professor McCormack, and his colleague Professor Jan Dewey, we actually have some of the world leaders in the sort of the acknowledgement, the definition and the facilitation of person-centeredness. And what that also brings to Queen Margaret, although it's a small university, it brings us some fantastic sort of international links that we have with different universities and different institutions across the world. What we actually have here is just a very quick sort of breakdown of the slides. And if we have a look at how we achieve different countries, different areas have, I suppose, their own language as to what we mean by what structures and what defines a master's degree from an ordinary degree, from an honours degree, etc. In Scotland, we have, it's based on a numbering system, and that ranges from about 6 up to sort of 12. And where we're at is at to the achievement of an ordinary degree at university, which is generally around 3 years of sort of work. That comes in at what we call level 9. Level 10 is generally on or around an honours level degree, and that's generally around, say, a 4-year honours degree. It comes in at level 11, and master's level comes in at level 11. So this is what we're looking at here, is level 11 of work. There's only one more in Scotland over and above, and that's level 12, and that's PhD and doctorate level sort of work. And that comes in to say that's just a Scottish sort of framework for how we accredit the different levels, etc. And so within Scotland, to get your master's degree, you need to achieve around 180 credits at level 11. There are some areas where there might be a wee bit of variation in that. On the whole, it's 180 credits at level 11 is what we look for. And what we do is we don't want it to be like necessarily an all or nothing. You either do the whole course or you do nothing. So actually what we do is we have stepping off points, and they're actually based around splitting the 180 credits into 3 60 credit sort of possibilities. And so to get a postgraduate certificate is 60 credits. If you then undertake another 60 credits to get to 120 credits, that gives you a postgraduate diploma. And in line with most sort of masters working is that once you've got your postgraduate diploma, if you then go on to do another 60 credits, which is in most cases a dissertation sort of project, there's another 60 credits. So that combination of a PG certificate 60, PG diploma is 120, and a further 60 with your dissertation takes you up to that 180 credits at level 11. Now what we actually have for the MSc in person-centred practice is that we have 2 core modules. That is the theory and practice of person-centred health and well-being, and the leading person-centred practice for health and well-being. And that's 40 credits. Now these are sort of core modules that have to be undertaken. And actually from there on in, you can actually see that there's elective modules, another one for the postgraduate certificate, and actually there is, within the postgraduate diploma, there's a range of elective modules that you can actually take. So we have 40 credits of core modules, and then in essence 80 credits of elective modules. Now, what we have is that this is the MSc person-centred practice has at its core the 2 core modules. It is a framework though, and there's lots of different pathways. And what these pathways mean is that you could think about doing if you were a registered nurse, you could see about doing, and you had funding from local health board, you could think about doing district nursing or health visiting. If you were a practitioner working with the mental health and well-being sort of routes, then there's a specific set of pathways that incorporate the core modules. There's a set of modules that steer you towards mental health and well-being. There is also a public health and well-being pathways. So if you were interested in finding out more about the MSc person-centred practice, and if there was any particular pathways that align with where you're working just now, where you want to possibly take your career aspirations, and that's something we can certainly talk about if you sort of establish contact with the university. So that's really, in essence, it's a setup of the MSc in person-centred practice. These sets of core modules, the theory and practice and the leading person-centred practice, a range of electives that can be, to an extent, context-specific. And again, and some of the examples of the potential of electives are also displayed. So in developing professional practice, risk and resilience, advancing practice and clinical assessment, making judgments and decisions, independent study. So as you can see, there's a range of possibilities here, and you would be sort of guided, and we would discuss you through what your possible options and best possible routes for you actually are to undertake. Although we've spoken about the fact that there's lots of different module options, and within each of these options we can look to help set it to the actual context in which you're working. Throughout all of the modules, and some have more than others, and that's why we've used the term it's woven, it's sort of blended in throughout the modules, etc. But there's a range of sort of like overlying perspectives and ways of working. And what we've done is we've recently developed the MSc person-centred practice, and what we do within the university is a thing known as a validation process. So every 5 years we look at our programs, we review our programs, we get a lot of feedback from students, current and past students. We look at people who are our service users, we have discussions with employers. So we look at we do a wide ranging review. Then we essentially look at the content of what we're speaking about, and we work with and develop stuff that went well. If it was stuff in terms of maybe wasn't quite so well undertaken, then we look to change and amend accordingly. So as of this year, we recently went through an extensive revalidation process. And it was important that we, in looking and redesigning our modules, that we made sure that the following concepts were very much woven throughout the different work that we were actually undertaking. And so if you think about the initial aim, which was about that sense of using of research and different bodies of knowledge, etc., then it's very much a case of that we increase the visibility of research-informed teaching and learning activities. It's important that we evidence the practice in which we're doing, and if we're talking about personhood, and if we're talking about the fact that this is more than just a concept that sounds nice, we need to know that is an efficient and an effective way of working, and there's an increasing body amount of research that shows that actually that person-centeredness and person-centered practice in terms of increasing people's health and well-being can have profound effects on sort of issues around a person's well-being, etc. But we need to make sure that we back that up with research, and we need to make sure you as master students are comfortable with the use of evidence and research, and so we make sure that that's embedded into our modules. We don't want all modules to be exactly the same, and therefore it's very important that within each of the different modules, and within modules itself, there was a real diversity of learning opportunities for you to undertake. And one of the things that we often explore is around the fact that, that be creative and critical creativity very much is a way of working in which you can sort of evidence your learning, you can evidence your knowledge, you can put out different concepts across in a variety of different ways, and we make sure that there's a real diversity of the learning opportunities that we actually open to the learners. We've already spoken about the fact the importance of making sure that what we talk about is backed up with evidence, and actually, and the way in which we do the assessments, the way in which we do teaching, is designed in such a way as that it makes it context relevant. So it is open to people from all these different sort of backgrounds, as we ask them and the ways in which our work goes and the way in which the assignments are designed. It allows you to set it to your relevant context for you. One of the things I would say we do about the developing your skills as a master's student is we certainly do look at the facilitation of learning, the development of your critical thinking, and the importance of reflecting and acting on your learning and on your practice. And so that concept of reflexivity is very much built in and woven throughout the course, because only by, I suppose, really sort of looking and thinking about your actions can you see about what went well, what could be better, and how could, if I was more person-centered, what effect would I have not necessarily just on myself as a person, but as the people I work with and the people I work for as well. The other sort of issues that are woven throughout the different modules, as I say, is that we recognise that there's lots of different perspectives around philosophical perspectives around person, and we sort of make sure that we incorporate, we understand, and we bring these together as part of the discussions that we have around the topic. Another thing is we've spoken about being that sense of that community of learners coming together, and it's that ability to undertake sort of critical discourse through discussion, through debate, often some of the challenging perspectives around necessarily what, around beliefs and values, which are often held very closely and are very important to a person. When they actually get sort of brought out and sort of discussed, etc., it can be quite a challenging time. And that sense of discovering other people's beliefs, their perspectives and assumptions, that can be sort of very enlightening, very empowering. It can be very challenging as well. But that's part of the fantastic nature of this sort of program. So that's very much just a very brief overview of what the MSc in person-centred practice actually entails. More details on the technical aspects about sort of applications, etc., on terms of sort of starting times, etc., can be gained from people at the admissions are actually going on to the QMU website. My email address is there as well, blawson@qmu.ac.uk, and as I say, there's also lots of information on the Queen Margaret University website, and I would advise you to go there in the first instance to get more information. But I certainly hope that you found that a useful presentation, and hopefully that will encourage you to find out a wee bit more either about the MSc in person-centred practice or just sort of general studies with that Queen Margaret University. So thank you very much for your time, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.